a website dedicated to comics.
Right, okay.
And mostly American comics, but there's a lot of
Okay.
English comics too.
I'm Yann, I work for local student radio. So it's,
Okay.
Okay, with the review on the website and radio show for imaginary cultures and metal and gossip. And there is one website over here.
You want me to keep this in camera, or it doesn't matter? You want me to keep this in camera, or it doesn't matter?
C'est important.
Est-ce que ça vous gêne
Pas bien français.
No,
It's okay.
It's okay.
Okay, you can. This records wherever. This records good. Okay.
Yeah, niveau du son, c'est bon. Yeah,
So if I just rest it here, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tu peux t'approcher si tu veux. Parce que pour l'angle, sinon tu vas être.
Du coup, ouais, toi,
ça va pas. T'arrives à avoir un cadre à peu près potable là ou...
Le
problème, c'est qu'il y a la lumière, sinon de l'autre côté.
Ouais.
Oh,
Avec le son,
Alright,
ça
yeah,
peut-
Du coup, Jeff, c'est toi qui poses les questions parce que moi je vais faire le cadre. Du coup, je vais pouvoir faire les deux. T'as mes questions en français, je peux les traduire en français. Désolé, j'ai oublié de les faire. Alors, ok. Vous me dites quand c'est cool pour vous. C'est bon, faut juste que je lance là-bas. Je vais juste lancer l'enregistrement. Hop, c'est parti. Attends, j'enregistre pas encore. Petite mise au point parce que je sens que c'est hyper flou. Vas-y. C'est cool. Si quelqu'un veut commencer, je sais pas.
Well, we're Comics Blog, we're a comic website, and would like, well, maybe you could tell us who you are for the beginning of the interview.
Okay, the name is David Llyoyd. I am a sequential artist, and I have produced many works over the years, but I am most well known for V for Vendetta, and in France I have produced for the first time Kickback, which is a crime thriller, but I am most known for Vendetta, and I'm happy to be here at Utopiales.
Thank you. About Kickback, it's published in the States by Dark Horse, I think. Or is it?
It's published in the States, was published by Dark Horse, but their contract has run out. But in France, it's by Carabas, and Carabas is a very good company, and Carabas is still available here, still available to others in America, and yes.
Okay. You began, well, it seems you began your career alongside Alan Moore, and what's your point of view with his own career? You started with him.
Well, yes, when I worked with Alan, Alan was about 2 years into the business, where I was 3 years into the business, so we were both kind of like early as entrants into the mainstream industry. Although Alan had been doing his own thing for local newspapers beforehand, and I had been doing small things too. But I was the first person that he collaborated with on a story, and I think we were both learning, and I think we produced something that was very successful then.
And intemporal, yes. About the evolution of the industry, there's something that's odd, or that seems odd from here. It's UK artists and writers seem to export themselves quite a lot, especially in the US. And on the other side, UK comics seem to have a lot of problems exporting themselves, except when they piggyback from the States, like V for Vendetta did, like Judge Dredd did, and lots of comics from the UK did. Any insight about why?
The reason for that is because the British publishers in comics don't really care about comics. It's very sad because traditionally Britain has been a birthplace of great comics. It's one of the great inventors of comics in various forms. But in the 1980s, British publishers gave up on comics. They didn't care about comics. They weren't interested in comics. They didn't think they could make any money from comics in a major way. So they had no respect for the talent that was in England and Britain at the time. So many of us exported ourselves to the US. Companies like DC specifically, DC Comics in America came out here specifically.
But with Eclipse, I think one of the first that did some publications from the comics from the UK was Eclipse Comics, with Peter Milligan's, I don't remember the name of his series, Strange Days, I think.
Yeah, Strange Days, yeah, I'm sure, I know that some English companies did, but I think that was part of that whole exodus of British creators.
It was.
Led by DC that brought myself, Alan Moore, Pat Mills, John Wagner, lots of British people over to America because British publishers didn't care.
Didn't care. Okay. About the career of V for Vendetta, is it more rewarding for you, or a bit of a drawback to you that it keeps coming back to you? I mean, is it something you're more proud of, or sometimes it gets tiring to always refer to that?
No, because it's been very good for me creatively. It's allowed me to do whatever I want to do. Financially, it's been very good because, again, it's allowed me freedom. And it's a great brand. I mean, it's a great book. It says something. It means something. And I'm very happy to be associated with it, to be associated with the creation of it. And it's just fine by me. When I'm in an industry where there are lots of people who work hard, who get no recognition at all for their hard work. I've worked hard and I've been lucky to work with a great writer, and I'm very happy to be associated with it, always. Toujours.
Toujours. Okay. About the association with V for Vendetta, what do you think about the trend with the Anonymous and the use of the gag mask?
I think it's great. I think it's the really good thing about the mask of V and the symbol itself is that it's neutral. It only represents protest against a tyranny. It has no political movement behind it. It's not like, I mean, if you think back to the past, like the image of Che Guevara, for instance, which was often used in political demonstrations for years, that had a movement behind it, a political philosophy, whereas the mask of V is merely a representation of opposition to tyranny. It's neutral, and that's why it can be used by so many people in so many different aspects. Yeah, and I think it's great, and I hope that the people who are protesting with that symbol, with that image, actually get somewhere, because I mean, we're in a world where everything is controlled by corporations who have massive power over politicians and governments, and it seems like the ordinary man has no real voice of opposition, and that mask, that symbol, is merely a symbol of opposition, and so that's why it's so valuable in all the very many purposes that it's put to.
Okay. Yes.
About the mask, is it one of the first ideas that you had when you created V for Vendetta?
Well, we had a whole bunch of ideas when we created V, but we couldn't come up with exactly the right image. We had a character who was against the dictatorship, who had personal grudge against a tyranny, but we didn't have a particular character, a particular quality. And Guy Fawkes, the idea of resurrecting Guy Fawkes, which is an historical figure in British history, was tied in to what we wanted. It gave us the kind of theatricality and the flamboyant nature of this character. And it worked. At the time in England, a lot of the creators of bande dessinée were of a revolutionary nature. We didn't like the way the world was changing, our government was changing, and Guy Fawkes had that revolutionary spirit. He was a failed revolutionary, but his spirit was still celebrated in English celebrations every 5th of November. So we thought it was a great idea to kind of resurrect that for our character.
What do you think of the movie, how it ended up to be? Do you think the spirit is...
The movie is a very good version of Vendetta. That's the way I look at it. It's not... in an ideal world, it would have been better if it was like much closer to the original. Of course, you'd expect me to say that because I'm one of the creators. But I understood, as soon as I saw the script, I understood that it was for a different market, a different audience. In Hollywood, there's more money involved, there's a different demographic involved, and I just am glad that it was as close to the original as it was, when lots of other adaptations from bande dessinée have been less than perfect. The great thing about the movie is that it's well directed, it has great acting, and the central core of it maintains the spirit of V. That message of individualism and the absolute essential need to hang on to who you are, because that's the important thing. Everybody in the world is like forced by pressure into conformism. You're supposed to do certain things, and your individuality is squashed often for the sake of society or whatever. And the important message of V for me is that individuality. Stay true to who you are to the last inch, and that's really important, and that's key in the movie as much as it is in the book.
What do you think of the fact that they gave a face to V
at the end of the movie when
But they didn't.
they kind of did.
They didn't.
In the comics, we see many possibilities of who he might be.
And in the movie, you see the same. In the movie, the mask is everybody. Isn't that true?
Stays Hugo Weaving at the end.
No, Hugo Weaving is never shown.
No, we don't see the same movie, I think.
Oh no, I think we did.
All right.
You haven't seen the movie.
Maybe.
Hugo Weaving is never shown in the movie.
Oh, nice. Okay, my mistake.
Just about what you talked about, the philosophy. The first issues of Vendetta were issued just after the punk movement, and David J. from the Gothic Band Baus did some kind of a soundtrack to the comics. Were there other links between UK comics at that time and rock and roll and counterculture as a whole?
Well, only in a kind of vague sense. Alan was a big fan of underground bands, and of course knew David J. Bauhaus. The movement of punk and that whole attitude was very relevant to the creation of V. For myself, I'm a kind of like, I liked the attitude of Sex Pistols, but I didn't like the music that much. I mean, I'm a kind of, I'm Beatles, Stones, David Bowie, Prodigy, Chemical Brothers. So I think the thing is that I think both Alan and myself are kind of like are interested in what's happening and what is kind of not conventional, that's kind of edgy. So I think that there's that much connection. But I have to say that Alan was always more interested in the outre than me. But musical influences, they were part of the creativity of it. Along with the science fiction authors like Harlan Ellison and people who were against the sort of like the general structure of things. Norman Spinrad, people who were sort of like edgier. It was all part of that period of creativity in British comics at the time.
Okay. Back to comics. I've noticed, looking at your originals, you use a lot of, I'm not sure about the term, it's not a line work. Well, you use line work too, but you tend to also try to not delineate. I'm not sure it's the right term.
I don't use contour lines.
Yes. And it's something that's not that frequent. Any comments about this, or is it? I suppose it's voluntary, but.
Yeah, well, I know that in France the ligne claire, yeah, it's very popular, and there was a great love in French comics for the clear line style, and lots of detail too. So I think that V is kind of unusual in the market there, but the basis behind the style used on V came from the subject. I always, whatever subject I'm using, or whatever subject I'm supposed to produce, I think about what style is needed for that subject. Mm-hmm. And with V, we were talking about a very stark, bleak style of future. So the ideal thing to use for that was a stark, bleak style of drawing. And that's how that came about. I'd seen something that a great American artist had produced, Jim Steranko. He'd been experimenting with various styles for a noir graphic novel that he produced called Chandler, in which he just used shadow to produce the effects of the drawing of the world. And I thought that was a very good starting off point. And I'd also been inspired by a great artist called Tony Weir, who'd worked on a Western newspaper strip called Matt Marriott's in England. In fact, Tony Weir actually ended up doing some of the work on V for Vendetta because I knew him, he was retired, and I liked his work. So he ended up working on some of the pages of V for Vendetta. But I always approach a subject from the point of view of what is the best style to use
for the story,
to tell the story, and that's the most important thing. And I've done that throughout my career.
And this was Alan Davis had also that very soft kind of style of drawing, and you also used very soft colors. And was it also you say because you wanted something bleak that tells the story, but was it also some kind of reaction to American comic books that were that much in your face?
No, I don't know. I don't understand the similarity between myself and Alan Davis. I think Alan Davis's work is completely different. But I don't. It was no reaction to anything. I wasn't reacting against anything. I think if you were talking about a reaction to American comics, then it's about the story itself. I think that both Alan Moore and myself were very interested in doing something that was very energetic and real. American comics at that time, at the beginning of the 80s, there was nothing really exciting going on at all. As we were working, people like Frank Miller ended up doing Dark Knight, which was extraordinary work. So as we were working, there was a kind of rebellion happening in American comics. People were trying to find new voices. But at the time we were working, we were not interested in busting things from an artistic point of view. Although for myself, I did want to change the way stories were told. I was always interested in trying to get a wider audience involved in reading comics than was current, and I saw that some things were putting a wider general public audience off from reading comics, like sound effects and thought balloons and stuff. That kind of like corny standard form of storytelling. And that's why when we created V, I wanted to get rid of sound effects and thought balloons, and even captions too. I wanted something that was more like a straight narrative, like you had in film and TV. Because I always thought that if you told a story in the same basic way that film and TV is told, you're liable to get more people. Whereas if you put annoyances like sound effects in the way, that will stop people from enjoying what we can do, what people like myself can do with comics. So that's why I suggested that we do that. Alan was a little bit unhappy with that at the beginning, but he ended up using captions as thought balloons. So although he didn't like the idea of not using thought balloons, he ended up using them through captions. But the basic concept of trying to tell stories in a different way that would free them from the prejudice that the general public has with comics in the UK and the US specifically, because of course in France everybody loves bande dessinée, or a major portion of your population does, or more people than in the UK and the US. So that was the idea, to try and change the way we told the story. That was important. I don't think we were specifically interested in making a splash in American comics, other than by doing good work, really.
You said that the style is important to have a good impact, to tell the story. How does it work with Alan Moore in this case? Is it something like you draw 5 pages and you show him, and after you need to work again, or you always agree about the script before drawing?
Okay, I'll make this as short as possible. Very difficult when you talk about working in a situation like this. When we got together to brainstorm V into existence, we had a basic concept of an urban guerrilla fighting a fascist dictatorship in a future fascist England. But then that's all we had. The brainstorm of the Guy Fawkes thing was mine. It worked. I just had this idea and we worked together. And that worked. So we had Guy Fawkes as V, as the character. From that point on, what Alan would do, he would write a synopsis of the first book. As you know, the chapters formed books. The story is formed in a series of books, which is formed of a series of chapters. So Alan would write a breakdown of the first book. We would talk about that, discuss, what I thought was good and what I thought wasn't so good, and what I thought would work and what I didn't think would work, which was just a very simple discussion, and mostly it was, we didn't have any arguments on it. Then Alan would write a script, and it would be done script by script. And then, because we were working at 6 to 8 pages a month, we had a lot of time to work on it. So he would send me the script, I would phone him, I would talk about any changes that I thought might be useful or work, which were largely, I have to say, mainly frame breakdowns, because often the pacing would be better if it was broken down into different frames, so there weren't just 6 frames in the page, or maybe so there were 8. So you broke down the action. Most of that would be okay to talk about. Sometimes we'd argue about it, but so it would work episode by episode. But it was very organic, and things would change by accident often. And this is one of the points I've made in various interviews, that Vendetta and the strength of Vendetta was how slowly it was produced. We spoke about it, we talked about it. We didn't know what was going to happen at the beginning. Nobody knew. We were making it up as we went along. Until, I would say, the last 3 issues of the American production of it, because then Alan was so busy he had to just write 3 scripts, and then it was finished. So we couldn't talk about it, but it was a very organic and changed in minor ways and some major ways as we progressed. But it was like there was a synopsis of the book, we talk about it, and then each individual script, and that's how it worked.
So it really took years before you knew how it will end?
It did, yes. We had no idea when we began it. because we began it to a kind of brief. I was asked to create this character, this masked Avenger character, which that had to be kind of similar to a character I had created before for the editor, which was a kind of basic masked Avenger crime fighter character. Night Raven, a character called Night Raven, but you know, I wanted to get Alan involved because he was so brilliant, and I knew if I'd got Alan involved, it'd be much better than if I just did it myself. So you know, I was smart enough to do that. But what both Alan and myself wanted to do with that opportunity was not only tell a story that was just a good adventure, but was important, that said something. Because both myself and Alan were politically aware, and at the time, we had a problem with there was a neo-Nazi movement in England called the National Front that was gaining power, and we were both concerned about that because there was a lot of anti-union talk going on. Anyway, but all I can say is that both myself and Alan were concerned about the way politics were going in England. So the idea of using a character who was a fighter against fascism was something that we both thought was a very good idea at the time and relevant for the time.
There's something I'd like to talk about. It's you were associated to collaborating on one thing that is quite unique. It was called The Worm, and it had also, I think, some political background.
Oh, right. Well, I'm very glad you asked me that question about The Worm. Yeah, The Worm, the longest comic strip in the world. Yeah. That's what it was called. Yeah. Yes, you're right. It does have a kind of political background because I was helping to support at the time a school, the only evening school in comics and cartoons in England at the time. We don't have any real official teaching of the art of bande dessinée in British colleges, art colleges. That's changing gradually now, I'm glad to say. A lot more art colleges are initiating courses in sequential art, which is good. But for a long time, people were not interested, or academia was not interested in the art of sequential art. And so from the mid-80s onwards, I was helping at a school that was run by a charity called the London Cartoon Centre, where we were teaching people about the art of cartooning and cartoon art, sequential art. Unfortunately, it ran out of money in the mid-90s because those who were funding it moved their sympathies to other areas of charity. So we had a big fundraiser in the middle of London where we had 150 artists of my acquaintance and people who cared about the school came together and did a 250 frame comic strip, which Alan Moore wrote the basic story of, and then the scripts of it was done. There were 5 chapters of this enormous story, and the chapters were written by Jamie Delano, Grant Morris, and various other people who got together and did this work for us, and it was done over the space of a day. We did 250 frames, in shifts, people just sitting down in the middle of Piccadilly doing this great work. And later on, in 2000, we managed to produce a book of it. And the sales of that book contributed to further classes. We couldn't save the school at the end of the day. We did raise some money that continued the work that we did, but that was a very good, a fantastic effort by people who were trying to save this school. So you're right, that was political in one sense, yeah.
I have another question about the evolution of the industry, and specifically as the evolution of the fan-based industry. I mean, the fanzines, which seem to disappear as a written medium, as a published medium, and to the benefit of websites, especially. Do you regret the written part of the published part of it?
Well, yeah, and it's. I mean, I just think that's the way the world has changed. The important thing is that there is communication medium available, whether it's by print or whether it's on the web. Yeah, I mean, myself and Alan, we started our kind of careers in fanzines. I mean, because if you couldn't get published in the mainstream, you would work for the fanzines, as like myself and Alan did, and we kind of met. We kind of met in fanzines, myself and Alan. But
yes, yes, did. I mean, even in the States, I remember Roy Thomas used to be in fanzines because before he came into DC or Marvel. So.
Yeah, but I mean that's it. I mean, but if you can meet on the web, then that's just as effective a place. But there is lots of small press around. I mean, I'm very aware that there are lots of independent publishers. There's lots of small press, self-publishing going on. Some of it's on the web, and there are lots of mini comics being produced in print in England. We have a very thriving area of people producing print. I mean, there are conventions. Gatherings of webcomics and mini-comics in England. So print is not dead, but so in a sense it's still performing the same service. It's still allowing people who don't have access to mainstream publication, you know, they still have that ability to publish or reach people. So I think it's very good for everybody. I mean, at the end of the day, though, I mean, I think the only thing that occurs to me as problematic with a lot of the work that's on the web and such like is that at the end of the day you have to have some kind of editing to produce really high class work.
It's too much self-produced, you mean?
There can never be too much self-produced work. I mean, everybody's entitled to put their stuff on the web. But at the end of the day, for professional publication, I'd like to see more borders, more barriers, so that people learn. I mean, it's essential for people to learn and to be given some guidance, some tuition. If anybody can see print without realizing the need to really tell a story well, or to be shown how to tell a story well, this is why I'm a very big fan. I'm always interested in, as I said, the cartoon centre that I was involved with earlier. I think it's really important to provide tuition in this art form. You're lucky, in France you have it. I'm sure you have it in lots of areas. I was in Italy before and they have lots of schools of this particular art there. In England and the US, we don't. There are some in the US, but I think it's important that people learn how to do things well as having them do things. You know.
What are you working on?
Right now, I'm actually working on something that I can't tell you much about because I don't have enough people involved. It's basically a kind of magazine that involves myself and other creators of the highest level I can get. But I can't tell you much about it because I'm not sure. You know, I have to be sure that everybody's on board for it. So that's one thing I'm doing. The other thing is that I do have, as I told you, I was in Italy just recently because there's a collection of past short stories of mine that have been published in Italy under the title of Materia Oscura, which is the Italian translation of Dark Matter. That was the English title of it. It's a collection of short stories of not only the ones that I've done myself that I have copyright of, but some stories I've worked on with people like Pete Milligan and Steve Bissett. They're all good stories. There are about 10 stories. And as I say, it's been published in Italy. And if there are any French publishers who would like to do the collection, I'm always happy to hear from them. But it's a good bunch of stories that we'd like to publish in France as well as Italy.
Back to the Utopia. What about the exposition downstairs? And what about the general feeling you have about this edition of the Utopia?
Because it's your personal collection that we can see.
Personal collection.
It's yours.
The pages,
the
originals that are exposed.
Oh yes, the V for Vendetta exhibition that's on show here in Utopia is is all mine. Unfortunately, most of the early pages of Vendetta were sold to one buyer, and they've been sold on. And then a lot of the other pages I've given away to charity auctions over the years. What's in the exhibition is mainly most of what is left, except for a few pages that I have personally at home. But the Vendetta exhibition that's on show in Utopiales is available for hire, and has visited many European cities since we put it on hire. Utopiales itself, I'm very happy to be here. It's a really great show. I haven't had a chance to look around it much. I've seen some of it. And I saw that great prisoner show that was on last night, which I don't think is going to be repeated, which I think should be repeated because it's great. So I haven't had too much of a chance to look around, but it seems like a massive show, and it's really popular. You've got lots of crowds every day, and luckily it seems you have some good weather too. So that people don't have to queue in the rain. So it looks really great, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to have been invited to this show. So yeah, I'm having a great experience here.
Would you be a great number 2 or a great number 6?
I could never be a great number 2. I would definitely be number 6. Yeah.
Back to you worked on Doctor Who on the comic. Any comments about it or about the series as it evolves right now?
Well, I loved working on Doctor Who when I was asked to do that for Marvel UK. That was the Tom Baker period. I had stopped watching Doctor Who then. I was a very big fan of Doctor Who when it began, when it was very realistic, very kind of, it forced you to believe in it, very dramatic. Later on it got very kind of light-hearted. Although the scripts are great. I mean, I recognise the quality of the work, and the people I was working with on Doctor Who obviously were great. Steve Moore was one of the great scriptwriters of the Doctor Who magazine stories. In fact, Steve Moore taught Alan how to write comics. So he was, Steve was the ultimate professional, one of the great writers in our business. So I really enjoyed working on those stories. Although Doctor Who as a concept now, I mean, I've liked the resurrection of Doctor Who now. Although I liked Christopher Eccleston, the very early Christopher Eccleston ones, I think they were more solid. I think there's a kind of light-hearted quality to all the ones afterwards. You know, David Tennant. Nobody really takes anything seriously, which I think is a problem with a dramatic story. But I think the production values of the new stuff are fantastic, and so I think they're brilliant, and I'm really happy that Doctor Who has become so popular. Here, I know, as well as in the US and the UK, so it's great. So, but I really love doing those stories in the early days. Yeah.
And in the new series between Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat, do you have a preference?
Oh, that's interesting. I've seen some of the Stephen Moffat scripts of the earlier stuff. They are sort of like harder or tougher somehow, stronger. But I don't really have any preference. I think that the earlier ones of the Resurrection struck me as more interesting generally. I like the one with the gas masks, you know, the one with the kids.
It was by Stephen Moffat.
Yeah, that was incredible. I think that was really amazing. Applaud. I applaud Stephen Moffat there.
Well, would you have any other projects working again with Alan Moore, or is it something that's out of the question for now?
Well, I've never, I worked with Alan once, and we did great work, but then Alan immediately wanted to move off and work with other people, so there was no question of me working with him again. I'm just very glad that I did get to work with him. He's a great writer, and I think, when I worked with Alan at that time, in those days, we were both on the same, we had the same viewpoint. We liked the same movies. We came from the same appreciation of great TV, film, books, and those things just clicked. So we worked very well together. I very unlikely that we could do the same thing, and I just think we've done a great job on that particular book, and I'm glad it's been so successful. And I'm very happy to have been involved with it, and there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I have to apologise. I'm so sorry I was late. It's like
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay for us.
Oh, well, that's good.
We had